Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of the Ingpod podcast. Today we have two guests. It's a two for one. So we got Justin, who's the owner of JA Digitizing Studios, who's also the co-owner of the Embroidery Nerds. And we also have Jeff from Fuller Embroidery, who is his partner in the Embroidery Nerds. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So maybe let's start with Justin, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the industry, and Jeff, maybe once he's wrapped up, you kind of do the same, just to kind of introduce ourselves to you. The way I came across Justin, Sean, was basically Saps had seen some of his Instagram content, and he's like, "Yo, Justin does some crazy stuff, so you got to hit him up." So I hit up on Instagram like 2 weeks ago, and here we are. So Justin, if you don't mind, kind of getting our audiences who don't know you up to speed, that'd be great.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for about 30 years now. I got my start when actually I was in college studying architecture, and a family member owned an embroidery company. Basically started off with cartooning, which was blowing up artwork 6:1 for their in-house digitizer back in before it was on screen. Everything was done on a tablet. So I got a lot of my insight on how artwork is translated into thread and garments. So did a lot of work with that. Ended up getting into actually the production side, was on the machine for several years. I started getting into production management from there. And then out of necessity, trying to find good digitizers at the time, I found myself editing files every time we got it back from the digitizer. So ended up just, getting into it myself. For a point of time, did both kind of digitizing and work production. Ended up opening my own company up, doing digitizing full time. Since then, I feel like I'm learning all the time, depending on who I talk to, what I see, the technology that comes out. Ended up meeting Jeff and a couple of people with the Embroidery Nerd group. They actually won a competition in the group, a digitizing competition, and they invited me to help them out as a moderator. And now I'm partner. So jumping into the world of education, I find it really rewarding. I love helping people learn stuff even in these groups and chatting. And that's where we're at now. Doing a lot of education online. We have our own, live podcasts that we do. A lot of content on social media, just focused on helping, as well as, my full-time digitizing gig.
Sweet. And now Jeff.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Jeff Fuller. I run Fuller Embroidery Works LLC. I want to say I started that around 2018, 2019. I collected embroidered patches for about 10 years. And then one day decided why not make them. So I went to the internet and bought the cheapest of all cheap things and brought it in-house and started trying to make my own patches. Since then, I've been through several machines, a lot of different software, and one of the things that me and another member of the Embroidery Nerd group had a problem was at the time was finding educational content, people that would share with us what knowledge they had, how to do things. And so we started the Embroidery Nerd group to kind of combat that, to make education a little more available, to answer people's questions, and to try and get away from the whole stigma of when you ask somebody, the initial response is just trade secret.
Yeah, that's that. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why when we jumped into embroidery, I didn't want to digitize at all, right? You have Ryan Moore from Ryanette that shared all the secrets for screen printing to where you can pretty much build your business and then scale it to automation machines and automatic and have a pretty big shop. But when you looked online to find something for embroidery, it was like, nope, trade kept secret. Like you can't learn anything. You have to learn on top of everything. And then you hope to find somebody that's going to help you out, or you're just going to digitize it out, right? And for me, it wasn't a solution. I was like, nah, I'm not going to do this. I have my hands full with the screen printing shop. We're just going to buy a nice machine that's going to run nice, and we're going to find a great digitizer that's going to help us out. But what are your recommendations for someone who's starting out? Do you often deal with customers who are buying the software, they're trying to do it themselves, and then they come to you? Or like, what do you see as a trend coming now? Because you are putting that content out there that's helping a lot of people.
Well, as far as that goes, yeah, there is a massive trend. A lot of times when people are buying a machine, the software's kind of just slid there right with it. And they're like, oh, it's super easy. You just click a couple buttons and you've converted your artwork now to digitizing, and you run it on your machine and you hit the green button and money comes out. Right?
Yeah.
It's so generalized and made sound so simple that everybody's like, oh, I can do this. And I mean, honestly, when I started, that was the exact same thing. I bought software and I was like, okay, I can push these buttons and it'll work, right? And it wasn't until I got stuck on a hat design, and I had somebody that actually digitized the logo for me, and then they sent me the logo, and I watched it run on the machine, that I realized I knew absolutely nothing, and that I was doing it all the wrong way. And then that sparked me to learn more about how to do it, because I'd seen something good run once. And when you have that experience, you want to have that experience constantly. So
Yeah. I mean, we see that all the time. When customers come to me and they buy equipment, right? And that could be screen print or embroidery or whatever. They're excited about their purchase and they want all the bells and whistles. So, we are obviously a partner with Tajima Software, which was formerly called Pulse. And most of my customers, they're like, okay, well, I want to buy the digitizing software. I want to do everything in house. I'm like, whoa, listen, like, it's an art. It's a skilled trade. It's not something that you're just going to, it's not like Sean, a Brother DTG print. Okay. You basically throw the image in there. It's a rip software. You pick the settings and it prints. And then, if you need more white, you add it. But digitizing is a beast in itself. Often I tell customers two options. One, you don't get it at all and you just outsource it, find a good digitizer. Or two, what I say is probably the best way is you go with something simple like Pulse Composer. Will have all the pre-digitized names and numbers and that kind of stuff. And it'll give you the ability to make minor adjustments to someone that sends you a file, right? Because you don't want to be having, if you're doing custom names for Canadian Tire and you're putting all their sleeves, for example, you don't want to have to be getting every single one of those digitized. So that's where I usually tell people. And, when we sell, for example, the higher ones like Pulse Maestro and that kind of stuff, they get 2-day training from Pulse. But after that, I mean, they're stuck. It's not that easy. It takes a long time. So I usually say, look, like your money that you're going to be making is based on you producing garments, right? The more garments you produce, the more money you make. So if you're going to spend days trying to figure out a challenging file, you're losing money, right? So just send it to a professional and get it done right. So that's what you do. But some people, when they want to jump all in, they want to be involved in every aspect of the process. And that's usually where the struggle happens, right? And then they call us back saying, hey, listen, I keep getting thread breaks. And we go over there and it's like, well, your file's like trash, right? Which kind of leads into, my next question, which is basically talking about when people first start out, they want to like pinch pennies everywhere we can. That's why they want digitize to begin with, because they don't want to spend any money. But then if they finally say, okay, I'm going to outsource, they look for the absolute cheapest partner they can possibly find, which is going to be someone that's, overseas and they're doing auto-digitizing, right? You guys aren't doing auto-digitizing. You guys are manually digitizing. Can you explain? And also there's a big difference in price, right? I mean, I get emails every single day and hit up by like 30 people on Instagram constantly asking me to do auto digitizing overseas, which is like, it's like half my time is just deleting those comments. But can you guys explain the importance and the difference between going with a quality digitizer that manually does it versus an auto digitizer, and how having those poor files will affect their embroidery business?
Yeah, so like you said, a lot of it overseas is done without our digitizing. And it's like you said, it's a lot of the, click, convert, and it may or may not look great on screen. It represents the look of the logo, but it doesn't take into account the real life interaction with thread and the garment. A lot of those digitizers, that's the thing. They get it to look good on screen, and so the PNG that they send you with the file, this looks great, and then when you start sewing it out, there's pathing problems, there's density problems, there's no compensation. So yeah, in the long run, the quality of the designs get to really suffer. And to tell you the truth, the difference in price that, I know since from when I started to what my pricing is now, unfortunately it was driven down because of these overseas digitizers. And just to compete, I had to lower my pricing. But, those those overseas digitizers, when someone comes to me and gets a quote and goes to them and they see they can save $10 to $15 on one design, in the long, they don't understand in the long run that $10 to $15, you're going to lose money exceeding that $10 to $15 tenfold. You know, the design running improperly is going to cause more production time, or if there's problems with the design, it's going to be more production time, more headaches, more damaged garments, or the quality's not there and you don't retain that customer coming back because you're putting out inferior product. So yeah, when people come back to me and say, "Oh, I can get it cheaper," and just say, cheaper is not always better. It's in the long run getting that skilled digitizer that does it manually, understands production and what needs to be done to make sure that your machines are running optimally and efficiently and giving out the best possible product.
Yeah,
I agree.
definitely.
That's well said. I mean, you always say, like we said it often in the podcast, right? You can't have good, fast, and cheap. What you get overseas is fast and cheap, right? That let's be honest, it's what it is. It's fast and cheap. You get it before 24 hours because it's auto digitized and it's freaking $6.
Exactly.
But then you bring it on press, and then well, not on press. When you bring it onto the machine and start to embroider, that's when you see the problems, right? You start having thread breaks, but not just that even if you don't get thread breaks, the quality is just not there. Like small letters, density, you're missing density, you're seeing the color of the cap in the back. Like for me, when we first started, I didn't know better, right? So I just looked online and I found the first digitizing company, and that's what I picked. Like it wasn't even, I didn't even look at price. I just searched on Google and I found them because they had good SEO. I didn't like embroidery at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, man, this is a pain. Like, why is it so ugly? Why is my machine always not running? I would call RB. I'd be like, dude, come check my machine. What's wrong with it? Is it the tension? What am I doing? And then he'd bring his digitizing file. He'd run it on the machine. He was like, it's running perfect. I was like, I couldn't understand, right? So I think it goes even further than that. It's just like the downside of production, and then not being able to know when you first start is like, did I pick a right digitizer or not? So I think the education of being like, hey, what should you look for in a good digitizer? The language he's going to talk, the way he's going to ask you the question of like, what is it going to be embroidered on? Those are important aspects to get a good result, right? So if you're just starting those, like if it's just like a plug and play, you upload your artwork, he does it for you for free, and like he doesn't ask any question, it's not a good sign. That's what I found down the road. But
Yeah, it's actually
Yeah.
that's a good point. If your digitizer's not asking your questions, whether it be on your form, like you look at my order form, it's a book of questions.
Yeah.
But it's all necessary for me to give you the best possible design. And if, like you said,
100%.
if it's send the design and you're going to get it back within 24 hours, no questions asked, not even size or anything, then there's a problem. You should start questioning the digitizer that you're using.
I agree.
Sure. And I'm just curious, like, when they say like someone's doing auto digitizing, do they literally have a software and they click a button and it's pretty much done? Like, are they having to do much work to it? No. Just like
It
no.
is.
Okay.
No, like you look at it, and Lisa Shaw has said this before. Click, poof, done. It is kind of like that's the best way to describe it because you just select your artwork, and it'll pull it down to let's say 6 to 8 colors, and you hit OK, and then all of a sudden you've got all these objects on your screen that look like embroidery.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and whether or not it picked the right stitch count or stitch type, it picked the right densities, underlays. It's kind of up in the air based off of the buttons that you clicked during the I'll call it a wizard, right? So it like
Yeah.
walks you
Yeah.
through the
Okay.
process.
Yeah.
But you're going to get extra trims, you're going to get extra color changes, and people don't really understand, when you want to talk about production, how much time a trim or a color change actually adds to your production. I know when I started, I was doing patches, right? And so I'd lay out, let's say 50 in a hoop. And I went through and I spent an extra 2 hours on a design pulling out trims and color changes. I was able to save like 8.5 hours of production time by
Wow.
spending that
Crazy.
extra time pulling out trims. Because, one patch, it maybe adds 2 or 3 minutes, but you start expanding that over your entire production run, that time really adds up. So you want to make sure that you're getting something that's going to be quality digitized by somebody that knows what they're doing. that it's path, the least amount of color changes to keep registration. These are all things that, like, if you send a file to Justin and you send a file to myself, those are the things that we look at when we digitize it. It's we want to make sure that it's going to run for you, it's going to run well, and it's going to optimize your time so that your money is when the needle's moving up and down. And if there's a color change or there's a trim, that needle's not moving up and down. The machine's doing something. So you really want to make sure that it's optimized for your use, and utilizing somebody that really knows and understands digitizing. They're going to give you a file that is optimized.
I think a lot of those digitizers that use the auto digitizing, they've mastered the 5 minutes they give it to edit stitch types and angles just to make sure it looks good on screen, and that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, and what I often try to stress to my customers is, like, for example, to do a 1,000 stitch design costs about 3.5 cents in thread, right? I mean, you almost don't even calculate the consumables. Where all your money is in labor, which is directly related to your runtime. So that's the one place you don't want to cheap out, is on your file, because embroidery machines, they're not fast. It's not like you could throw a guy in a screen print press, have two guys on there and bang out 550 units an hour, you know what I mean? Or 700 units an hour. It's a much slower process. So that's why you're in my opinion, the embroidery needs to be perfect, just to make sure that you're more productive. That's not where you cheap out, is on your digitized design, right? So yeah, that's my take on it. And now I have a question for you guys, just out of curiosity. How do you guys quote a job, for example? Like, and how do you know how long it's going to take you, right? Do you basically have a way that it kind of, you roughly estimate the stitches and you quote based on stitch? Like, what does that process look for you guys from a manual digitizer perspective?
Personally, I have a set price for any standard chest or hat design, with the caveat of complex designs may cost a little bit more, and that's something I always go back to the customer and say, hey, this one's a little bit more complicated. Or even full back designs, I quote by the piece, because I know what elements are going to take me a while. That's going to have me in front of the computer twice as long or whatnot, just to kind of go back to them and say, hey, this one's a little bit more complex. I'm comfortable enough at a point now where the average design is only going to take me a certain amount of time, and I can knock those out all day.
Yeah, it kind of comes
that
down
makes
to a
sense.
game of averages. You have a design that's going to come in. It's going to take you 15, 20 minutes to do it. You have another one that's going to take you 45. Your average is, you're trying to look at 30 minutes. So the only thing that, like I do, I have standard set pricing as well. But I'll get people that'll ask for special things, that they're like, I want you to do this technique or that technique, and it just takes longer to do that. And so then I'll go back to them and say, hey, you just tripled my time to do this.
Yeah,
I need you to pay a little bit more.
makes sense.
But at the end of the day, everybody wants a nice product. So I don't think the price of I mean, what's the cost for a standard left chest embroidery digitizing?
My rate is at 25.
I mean,
25
in my
US.
mind, that's cheap.
Yeah.
Like who? I mean, you go to Lids and you want to embroider your cap. They charge, if I'm not mistaken, it's $45 just for like a number or a name, which is pre-digitized in their software, right? That's $45. If you bring your artwork, it's like 150. It makes sense. They have to do it. It's a one-off. They have to send it out, digitize it. Like in my mind, it makes sense. So the customer is willing to pay for that. So if you want to save $20 and crap out on a job that's not going to look good, I mean, in my mind, it's just,
Right.
yeah, it's not the type of business I would like to run, but that's me. There's another thing that's pretty big in my mind too. It's like, if there's advice that you would give to people that are ordering digitizing, what's the most important thing they need to include into either their email or the form to make sure that it comes out the right way the first time? Because when I started, I didn't know, right? And like I was saying, I just sent those out and it was like an image and a mock-up, and that was it. At least I sent the mock-up with like the cap, so he knew what was going on the cap. But like, what's the most important things? Maybe two, three things to ensure that the customer is going to achieve the end result he's looking for or his customer's looking for.
So the things that I love when people send me are a clean art. I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten a picture of a side of a van at an off angle, and they're like, I want this on a hat, right? So definitely the better the art, the better your end product's going to be. The size that you want it, I've gotten people that have just said, I want it the normal size. And you're like, okay, the normal size for what? Like, we go on the front of a shirt, we go on the left chest, full back. What normal size do you want? So clean art, size, and most definitely the application. And if you really want to be specific, if you send a link to the garment you're using, that is extremely helpful. Because your definition of a polo might be a cotton piqué polo, or it might be one of those performance super slick polos. But if you send the link to the actual product you're going to sew it on, I know exactly what it's going.
And
That's interesting. And yeah, go
I was
ahead.
to say, and if it's multiple applications, Jeff and I might digitize a design differently if it's going on a thinner performance polo next to a hat. It may dictate that it say, hey, there's times where I say there's a revision because there's a completely different way I need to digitize it, or it's just something where I know, what, with a few tweaks here and there, I'm going to give you 2 files because this one's not going to work on that one, or vice versa. Another really important, on top of what Jeff's saying, is I know the question that I ask in the beginning when I start working with somebody is what kind of machine they have. Especially with hats, you're limited to a height to work with depending on what machine you have. I know a long time ago I was sending designs to a guy for hats, and he kept on saying, my machine won't read your file. And I'm, knocking my head against the wall like, I don't understand. I'm reducing it to 2.25. I'm reducing it to 2. Come to find out, the max size on his particular machine was like 1.9 inches, some arbitrary number like that. And it's like, okay, now that I'm, I was so used to working on the big industrial Tajimas that it never even occurred to me the machine's going to have limitations. So
It's a good machine if you want to embroider a little ladybug in the middle, maybe.
yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. Like the machine is probably important, and then do you suggest like the tools as well? Like what needles do I have, and what thread am I using, or is that not that important? That should be on our craft on our side to
I think specialty things like you wouldn't want to use rayon thread if you're trying to run 3D puff, just because it's not strong enough to uphold that type of density. On a day-to-day basis, I'm not really discussing needle size or thread unless it is something where I suggest using, a thinner 60 weight thread because of the size of text, something like that.
Yep, got it.
and on the topic of 3D puff, that's like, one of the first things that people want to do when they get into this, especially if they're doing a hat. So everybody wants to do 3D puff, when Lee Stewart, he had bought a Melco and he was all excited about embroidery, and then it kind of just disappeared for like 5 months. And I was like, Lee, like, what happened, man? You're not doing any embroidery? He's like, I hate embroidery. Don't ever talk to me about it. I'm done. I hate it. And I'm like, dude, what do you mean? It's like, it's the best. He's like, no, I had such a bad experience. And then I literally loaned him, a single head. I'm like, let me show you. And like, he fell in love with embroidery, and then within a couple months, he ended up getting a 6-head, I think it was 6-head TMEZ. And the TMEZs just crush hats. Sean, when we had the guest from Tajima, it was 50% more output with the TMEZ, right? So let's talk about 3D puff on hats. So let's talk about 3D puff. What do you feel customers need to do to be successful here? Again, whether it's proper digitizing equipment and tools, or how do you handle, puff differently and different types of puff? Do you like a softer puff? Do you like a more firm puff? What do users need to know to be successful in the puff game, basically?
Number one is the digitizing. There's a lot that goes into planning and the techniques used in digitizing. A lot of it is in the digitizer simplifying the design to make sure to work with 3D puff and not, completely changing the design where, the customer's like, this doesn't even look what I sent you. But understanding what can and can't work, because in the long run, it's just going to cause headaches if you digitize something the way it looks just because they're asking for puff doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to production. The foam itself is huge. I've taught many classes at these shows on 3D puff, and I hear people saying, "Oh, I got some craft foam from the local craft store," or something like that. Not only is the foams that are like craft foams so spongy that it negates the whole 3D purpose,
Yeah.
just because it's going to get smashed down. The way it tears off the hat, it doesn't tear off cleanly. I know when I post a lot of my work and my pictures from my customers and stuff, people say that really hard edge, almost that 90-degree edge on the 3D puff, and they're saying, why is mine look rounded? Mine, look flattened on the edges. And it's like, well, what kind of foam are you using? And that 9 times out of 10, it's because they're using a lesser foam, a cheaper foam, a softer foam. So the size of the foam, I always suggest to my customers 3 to 4 millimeters as far as the size of the foam. Anything less, again, I think you're negating the whole 3D puff look. Anything more, in my opinion, just starts adding more complications, and you don't really get much more out of adding that extra millimeter or 2 on your foam. And again, going back to the machine, unfortunately, the more introductory machines out there, I guess I should say, can't handle sewing through a Richardson 112 seam with a layer of foam. They've got issues, running it on a Tajima. There's a lot of times where a customer may say to me, I can't get this to work. There's something wrong with the file. I run back there, throw it on a Tajima. 10 minutes later, I'm like, works for me. So yeah, just understanding limitations of the design is a big thing, because a lot of people just think, like you said, 3D puff is cool. I want my design in it. They don't see the translation between what can and can't be done. So I try to educate people when they send in a design and say, the keyword 3D puff. And I look at it and it's like, there's no way. But let's maybe come up with a solution. Do you have a more simple, icon for your business or your team or whatever it may be that might translate better into 3D puff?
I would say
Okay,
machine's a huge
yeah.
part. I would say machine's a huge part of it too, because I see some machines out there that it's like you have to line up everything. It's like putting marbles down on a pool table to hit it just right. You gotta, extend the sewing distance in your controller. You gotta raise or lower your presser foot. You have to change your tension and turn your needle 8 degrees to the right and hop on one foot when you hit the start button to get it to run. Right? That's not the kind of production that anybody wants. You want to just be able to slam that hat on there, maybe hit 2 buttons in a controller and hit start and just have it run. So I think that, the equipment that you have is going to dictate a lot of the end result you're going to get.
Makes a lot of sense. And I mean, you always see those caps. I think not the problem, but like what everybody's looking for and wants is like the MLB and NFL 47 brand caps that they're embroidering on flat before they're actually sewn. So it's a lot simpler for them. But they see, like, for example, let's just take the Panthers from like the Florida Panthers, right? The whole Panther is actually 3D embroidered, and then you can see the line in the middle and then the other one on top. I think people, that's what they're aspiring to do on a round surface, and they think it's going to be possible. And I think it is possible if you're running your machine extremely slow, and then you want to go through that time, and you're talking to your digitizer like, hey, here's what I want to do. My customer's paying a premium. I'm going to run an 80-12 needle. It's going to be a sharp. Like, if you have those aspects dialed in, I think you can nail it. But on a day-to-day production, I think you're better off just doing, for example, like the Dodgers you're wearing right now, like that on a cap would just it would look amazing, right? Because it's just one color. The width is perfect. It's between like 6 to 9 millimeters wide, and it embroiders nicely.
Yes.
So maybe touch a bit on that if you think those are possible, or like what the customer should say to their customer when they're asking them, because we get requests almost every week. Somebody's sending us an MLB cap or like an NFL cap, right, from 47. They're like, I want this for my company. And I'm like,
Jeff, why don't you feel that? Because I know you have experience working with panel work.
With panel work,
Yeah.
oh boy. When you do a flat panel program, you can go huge. Like you can go 3, 4 inches vertically. You can wrap all the way around. You're not having to deal with the brim hitting the back of the machine or the sweatband that's sewn in 1/4 of an inch. Now you've lost that quarter and you have to go a quarter above that. I see it a lot with, I mean, not just puff logos, but like logos in general. People will send you stuff that it's like, that's not going to be possible. So I think if you really want to achieve something like that, it's going to be you're going to be doing a premium with your digitizer. Your customer's got to be paying that premium because it's going to take, not only is it going to take you a lot more time just to execute, it's going to take your digitizer a lot more time to do. And there's going to be a lot more revisions. But you also, when you have a customer that comes to you like that, one of the things that you can really push is, hey, this might not be the best concept or image that for your logo that we have, but why don't you let me talk to my digitizer and we'll see if we can come up with something that'll work for you, right? Because you take a logo like, I'm just going to use Pepsi. They've got their 2-color logo and then they've got their text. So if you want to put that 2-color logo and their text on a hat and you want it all to be 3D puff, it's going to be hard. It's not going to run well. It's not going to look good, right? But if you have a customer that has more than one element, I have one here local. They've got, it's a person running and then their text. And they wanted to do some puff. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just do puff on the element of the person running. Because ultimately they have a brand package, as I like to call it. They're all wearing their shirts that say their company name. They're all wearing their logos everywhere from every which angle. So I don't need to throw their super long name onto a hat for people to identify them with that company. It's just they want that hat branded. So as long as they're open, if your customer's open to having their logo like maybe one colored or a simplified version of it, it's important that they're open for that when they come to you, and to prep them right out the gate to say, hey, this is not the best candidate for that. I think it'd be really good for you to be open to some suggestions or some changes, and then you can talk with I'll talk with Justin about that kind of stuff. Justin, what do you think? You look at it and you can come up with kind of a game plan to attack it because a lot of that stuff is designed for it's designed for flat panel, or it's a logo that just looks fantastic, like the NY logo, right? They're not trying to put New York Yankees all around the hat. They're simplifying it to something that's going to look really clean and really good. And if your customer wants that, they're going to have to be open to possibly some changes, omitting some stuff, and simplifying that logo to get something that's going to be really clean and it's going to look fantastic in puff.
Yeah, like Sean was saying, this is a good example of something that's real basic. It's got nice bold lines to it. The outline itself is flat, and then the black is done in 3D puff. And as you can see, those edges there are nice and kind of rigid edges because the foam that I am using. But that's not to say that when a customer came to me with a really, really complicated design, and of course I like pushing the limits on 3D puff, so I was able to achieve something that was pretty intricate, yet it's still taken quite a bit different than what was the artwork, because the artwork was quite in depth. It looked like it was something that was designed for, a large print on a t-shirt. But, like
That's
Jeff was
insane.
saying, a lot of trial and error, a lot of sampling. So that is one thing you definitely want to keep in mind when you are ordering digitizing for 3D puff. Make sure you have time to test and retest and tweak here and there, because it's not an exact science, especially because there's so many different factors in it. Don't shoot me if my design the very first time doesn't come out perfect. Come back to me and say, hey, this little part here, the foam's sticking out, or this part here is, I really can't dig out the foam because it's, in a little crevice somewhere. So there's little minor adjustments that need to be done when it comes to 3D puff.
And yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Well, I was going to jump off Puff, but I'll let you, if there's anything else you wanted to say before that.
No, I was going to jump off Puff in the sense like there's so many options now as well that you can get really nice designs, whether it's a patch that can be done, or TPU, or now you even have DTF. Like there's a lot of many options for customers that want really intricate details they can put on caps too, right? So I'm like, there's a bunch of other things that's available and looks really nice. But what's the importance of embroiderers like just me sending stuff out there to have the basic digitizing tier communication to be able to talk to you guys and have the same language? Like, what's the level that I need? Is it I need to know like satin stitch, complex fill, like what's density? Is that important or not at all? As long as I can communicate what the customer wants to you guys.
I think it's hugely important. That's something that I think we kind of preach in our education that we do in our group, as well as like the classes that I do on my own. I'm not there to train digitizers per se. I am there to educate even the embroiderers to know the lingo and what to ask for instead of just the email. This design doesn't work. Can you be, a little bit more elaborate on that? So they can say the density, I need a little bit more density. I'm running this on sweatshirts or, the pull compensation or the push compensation. Being that specific in what you're trying to express to your digitizer makes our life, so much easier. Plus it conveys exactly what you're needing. So that's going to eliminate maybe one or two edits if I know exactly from the get-go what you're looking for, either expressed when you order the design or if it is running into an edit that you're needing. That communication is definitely key. So even if you're getting into embroidery and you decide to get the software, I understand you may not want to jump right in and digitize everything, but learning the basics and the real 101 of digitizing is definitely going to help you in the long run when you're trying to talk to your digitizer.
I'll jump in there and add a picture is worth a million words. I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten a text and it's like, this design doesn't run very well.
Right.
And that's it. Like, if you have something and you're not, let's say you don't understand the terminology completely and you take a picture, you can always zoom in and circle that in an image and say I see the problem here, right? Like if you're running a design and you get a thread break on every 3,858 stitch, right? You know where that is on that S or whatever, and you can just take a picture and you can circle and you can say my thread keeps breaking here, right? And just if I do that, I take a picture, I circle that area, and I send something like, let's say we send it to Justin and say the thread keeps breaking here, I'm gonna get a fix, right? If I just say, well, the thread keeps breaking,
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to get a complete fix right away. So I just throw in there, always send a picture.
Right.
And I deal with that all the time. I'm not a tech, but for some reason, customers will generally come to me first because I sold them the machine, and they're just like, "Hey, Zach, my DTG print doesn't look good." I'm like, "Okay, well, thanks." My printer. I'm like, "Can you send me a video? Send me a photo?" Like, I don't even know where to start. It's so generic. I don't even remember what machine you bought. You know what I mean? It's like I need some context.
Right.
So yeah, totally. Give us all the details. It's just easier to diagnose. Actually,
Right.
just touching on DTG, this is something that I want to talk about, and for me, it's super interesting, and I want to see if A, you guys are familiar with it, or B, what you think this is going. But we talked about this on another episode, and we just set up our first machine in Canada. So this is the Brother Direct to Embroidery, right? I'm gonna kind of zoom in there. So essentially, you're taking a design, and I have one here, and you're embroidering it, all in white. So there was like a soccer ball, and then they made it look kind of raised and stuff like that. But basically, you're embroidering everything in white. You're sending it to the Brother printer, and you're printing CMYK on top. And Sean, who's in a POD space, like for me, I think this is massive for POD companies. Generally, that would offer it would say, hey, we can do any design one-offs, but you have to choose from these 15 colors. Well, it's like that's almost impossible. So it never really took off. But I think with this whole concept of digitally printing the color, now Sean can go to anyone and say, hey, we do full POD embroidery. And obviously there's a bit of a workflow, so you have to embroider it all in white, and then the first time that you print it, you load it on the Brother, you take a picture and you size it, but then it remembers that for the future, right? So you might have to charge $5 extra, let's say, for the first design. You bundle that in with your setup for digitizing. So what's your guys' take on that? Have you seen the technology? I'm sure you guys are familiar with the color reel in the past, which was kind of a cool concept, but didn't really work because you couldn't get clean cuts like for vector work. And it was super expensive, and you had to have one on each head. I mean, this is really inexpensive machine that could, do 60 units an hour and print something like that costs like 5 cents, in ink. So what's your guys' take on this? Have you seen it? Have you thought about how you're going to start digitizing differently for this? Because it's all in white. Is it easier for you guys? What's your guys' take on the new Brother Direct to Embroidery system?
Have you seen that, Jeff?
So, I mean, it reminds me of the people that do sublimation over the top of embroidery, right? Where
Similar, yeah.
basically you embroider everything in white, you sublimate over the top of it, and then you've got your gradients and your colors. And I haven't seen the Brother direct to embroidery system yet. So I don't know if it kind of has that same limitation where it doesn't wrap all the way around the thread. I will say that it does change the digitizing quite a bit because now you're not introducing trims, right? If everything's going to be all one color, you don't have to trim at all. So that's going to speed up the sew time, but it's probably, and again, I haven't seen the actual technology. I've never held a sample, but it's probably going to look a little bit different than actual embroidery.
Yeah, so the cool thing
But
about it,
it's definitely going to change the digitizing for sure.
like it's hard to see, but the cool thing about the system, like unlike sublimation, you have to kind of line it up perfectly, right? And it's a pain, like you're flipping it up. But this, like there's literally, this is on a white. So if it wasn't perfect, there'd be overspray. But if you look, like you get perfectly clean lines and it does wrap around. You see that? Like it's not you don't really see any white at all. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I
It's
was able to see it at work at this past Long Beach show this past
yeah,
year.
exactly.
It was pretty impressive from what I saw. And like Jeff said, I think as a digitizer, I think you just need to plan out the pathing of the design differently since you're not going to have color changes and trims. So it's definitely something where, if people are starting to utilize technology like this, it's another thing that we're going to need to know as digitizers. That's going to be the end use of it. I mean, I guess technically, if I did that tiger in multiple colors, if someone just ran it all white, it would work the same way on their end, but they're going to have more time on the machine that's unnecessary because there's going to be color changes and trims that stop the machine. So, but yeah, it seems like it's cool technology.
Yeah, and Jeff, the cool thing about it, at first when I saw it, I'm like, okay, so you embroider it onto the garment and then you load the garment. And I was like, well, how do you like match up, the print perfectly? And that's the thing. You don't have to. It could literally be on a complete 180 and the brother will print it perfectly every single time. The system just registers. So it's
Well, that's
yeah,
pretty
it's
cool. I
pretty cool
definitely
tech.
can't wait to see it in Long Beach.
It's a
Oh,
nice
yeah, yeah.
machine. It's impressive to look at for sure. It takes like a capture. I think Zach, you guys have it on the RB website, right?
Yeah, yeah, we do. And
Let me share.
Sean used to have, five brother machines. He had the big GTX 600 and the four Pro Bs. And he literally, he just traded in two more brothers. So he got seven Mamaki DTFs. He literally kept two Pro Bs for this type of technology. So, I mean, this is a better idea. It's a short video. It's a minute and 20 seconds, but
Yeah, can you see this? So it takes like see it captures the image on top and then it scans your platen. And then once it captures it, you can upload the artwork you want right on the top of the platen. You place the artwork, the embroidered artwork that you want to do. And even though it's not placed correctly, it's going to scan it automatically. And like you can see, it's not the perfect height. And then it just goes unidirectional with the brother, so it's not shooting left to right. It's just shooting, for example, left, left, left when it's going back. So it's always has the same path, and like the alignment, it's insane. That's what impressed me the most in Long Beach when I saw it. I was like, I couldn't believe how registered it was.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, the vibrancy is really good too. Hey Zach, are these pre-treated before or no? It's just straight to fabric.
it's just like normally if you want to get better vibrancy, better opacity, you just pre-treat it. But it could even be with those
Yeah,
little like the hand spray ones. You don't have to put it
yeah.
into a pre-treat machine or nothing. So that's what we're going to be testing because we sell like the Albachem Brother pre-treat in a can. But yeah, Justin, Jeff, I mean, it's definitely something that I think, especially since it's like such new technology and like not a lot of people are going to even know about it or know how to digitize for it. So it could be kind of like a niche area that you play in. There's a lot of brother dealers, and you say, hey, listen, like we will digitize for this technology. So little business tip for you guys. You got to get on it. And
I'd be really
Sean might
interested
be
to
your
see
first customer.
I'd be really interested to see if you could partner with like a thread company and you get the thread pre-treated before you even put it on the machine.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
smart.
exactly.
So you just
Yeah.
get better vibrancy. The reason why I asked is because when I saw it at Long Beach, I thought that the vibrancy was actually really, really good. So I was like, this must be pre-treated. Or maybe it's just like the way it's embroidered, it just looks better, right?
And
I don't know.
I don't know if it's like this sample. I don't know if this was pre-treated because again, it's just like if you print onto 100% poly shirt, if you pre-treat it and you don't pre-treat it, you're just going to get better vibrancy. So maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure, but I would think it would be. But yeah, definitely. I mean, that's something that's in discussions, right, Jeff, is to have it fully pre-treated. I just don't know. The one thing I don't know is like if it's pre-treated and then it runs through the embroidery machine, and there's like heat going through the needle. Like I don't know if it could like I don't know gunk up the needle or something like that. Like that's the only thing that I would think of, right?
Yeah,
I
or
don't know.
just the tension in the machine.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's possible. That's kind of where utilizing the right tools, equipment, needles. I don't know if you've ever used the Cool Sew needles. They're Teflon coated. They're for doing, they work really well if you're doing like applique with the adhesive
Backing.
pre-backed, the pre-backed
Yeah.
letters with the adhesive backing,
Yep.
because it builds gum up on the needles, and those Cool Sew needles don't do that as much.
What are they called?
And they're
Cool Sew?
basically just Teflon coated needles.
Huh. Interesting. Maybe we do sell those. I have no idea. We have a lot of product that's not on our website, but we have some customers that do a ton of twill and they buy all the needles off of us. So I'm curious if we do sell that product. Okay, cool. Well, moving on. So, obviously at RB, like we really pride ourselves in like our technical support. It's a big thing for us. We hire a lot of techs. I mean, I just hired 3 more techs in the last week for Ontario. So really, we want to focus on taking the fear away from someone who's new to embroidery. So we come on site, we do full install training. We spend 1 to 2 days with them, and then we offer ongoing support where they can call us. But just like anything, embroidery, screen print, DTF, I mean, there's really only enough time to teach you the basics to get you going, and then it's up to you to learn and really you know take hold of like wanting to improve that craft. For someone who does want to push the envelope and get better, what are some recommendations that you have in regards to resources or ways to practice or whatever? How do you think is the easiest way for there to be a transfer of knowledge, like a podcast like this, for example? Where would you guys send people to want to learn more?
Probably to us.
There we go. That's what I was waiting for.
We have a group, the Embroidery Nerd group. We have a Facebook page and a Facebook group coming up on just under 10,000 members right now.
Nice.
But we pride ourselves to there's a lot of groups on Facebook when it comes to embroidery and printing. To me, it's just all those overseas digitizers, and every single question is usually answered by inbox me, I could digitize for you, even though it has nothing to do with digitizing. We have a really good group of moderators to help us, and we make sure that the content is there for education. It's not spam. It's not, people out there, pushing their business. Not only the partners that own the Embroidery Nerd, we're on there constantly to answer questions. But even the group members, they're so quick to jump on and say, this is what I've tried. This is what I've tried. It's a great resource. We actually have a Discord channel as well that you can join. That's kind of like the immediate discussions. Whoever's on there can answer questions quickly. We have a live podcast that we do every other Tuesday. Generally, we have kind of a topic in mind that we cover. Right now, we're in a couple months span of creating fonts in different software. We just finished a segment on DG17, Tajima software. We started with Wilcom. We're going to start getting into some other softwares that we have access to. There's a segment on there that we call Digitizing 911, where people have a design and they're pulling their hair out and they send us the file, tell us what's going on with it, and then on air we'll go through the design and say, hey, this is either how I would fix it, how we would redigitize it, and then we'll actually give that file back to that person so they have the file that's corrected. So yeah, I mean, I think I think we're a good source for that education. On top of, hopefully whatever company, software, machine company that you have locally that you're buying from. I know that's one of the big things that people come in with, just that general question in the group. What machine should I buy? And yes, there's certain levels of quality that you're going to get from different machine manufacturers, but they don't think about that. Well, what's best serviced in your area? You can buy the top of the line machine that's from some other country and they don't have techs here, or they don't have techs in your area. So to get that tech out, you're now spending $500 on a chip charge to get them out. So yeah, a matter of who can service you in your area, and those outlets online, um, and go to the trade shows. Go to the trade shows. Not only, Jeff and I have taught, I sit into the classes whenever I can. I don't know if people are familiar with Eric Campbell. He's a huge educator in the industry. I've learned a ton from him. He's got, weekly podcasts and whatnot that he does. Whenever I can, I turn that stuff on in the background just to see if there's something I hear that says, I've never tried that, or I didn't know that. But yeah, sharing. When you get frustrated, go online, share your problem. I'm sure 30 other people that read your post had the same issue at some time or another. And they've either solved it or have their way of maybe suggestions to you.
And we can always,
Totally.
everybody here, I guarantee at least once in their life has put in a needle backwards, right? Like these things happen, and you can just go online and you can ask. Again, what's serviced in your area is huge, and installation is huge.
Yeah.
My first machine I bought, I had online training, and that consisted of sitting at a computer for 30 minutes. And I think we got through how to hoop something because everybody had something broken on their machine when we started the training. And so nobody could actually do all of the training, right? But when you have, and I've had a tech come out and install a machine, and I've had a machine shipped, and I've had to fly technicians from Texas, or, they want me to ship my machine back to North Carolina to get it serviced. It's like,
Crazy.
if you have a tech within a local region of you that's going to cost you $200 or $300 in trip charge, $200 or $300 in trip charge is nothing.
Yeah.
When you look at these companies that don't have a U.S. presence, and you're like, I need a technician. Maybe they got one guy they recommend, and he's on the East Coast and you're on the West Coast, and now you're buying a plane ticket, a hotel room, meals, rental car. Like, having a solid dealer that is going to make sure that you're going to have somebody in your area that can take care of you is huge.
Yep. And that's our strategic advantage. Like obviously we're fortunate for to be exclusive with Tajima, and I'd be willing to challenge putting up a Tajima against any other machine, especially with the TMEZ. It just crushes it, and that's why we've been successful converting a lot of the big other brands like the Baradins and the ZSK shops. We now have that strategic advantage. But what's big for us is that we have Toronto, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Saskatchewan. We have techs everywhere, right? And I think customers who start with Tajima kind of take that for granted. I mean, luckily the machines don't go down too often, but when they do, we're close. Whereas like there's some of these other brands that are coming over and they ship them from the States, and they have no one in Canada. So you're not even talking about being one or two states over, Jeff. You're talking about another country. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And then you'll get the bill and it's like, 30% of what you paid for the machine. It's nuts. So I agree. I mean, I think, with the infrastructure we had, if we had another brand, would we be as successful? I think we could be pretty close, and that's because of our infrastructure. What we invest in education and resources and technicians, it's a big thing for us, right? I mean, that's why a lot of the big companies, they work for us because they know we have their back, right? And that's not just for embroidery. It's for, I tell people, for DTF. They're like, oh, I'm going to buy a DTF machine from the States. I'm like, are you nuts? That's even crazier than getting an embroidery machine from the States. Like, you're going to need help. Everyone needs help on DTF. It's like, it's in its infancy, you need support. And I agree to that point. It's like MHM, screen printing. They make a great machine. But you can't find anyone in Canada. Like, you're a sitting duck if you have a problem. So yeah, I mean, I realized the same thing. It's, when I had my printing business, I ran Brothers, and I was fortunate enough to buy them from RB Digital, and we had almost 30 of them at one point. And then when we brought in Cornette for the first time, which is another DTG machine, like I had to literally fly techs from the US, or if it was really bad, from Israel. Like it was insane, you know. But is what it is. I mean, it's supports everything. Cool.
It's been fun to have support for these machines for sure. Even though like it wasn't the machine's fault, it was either us not getting the right digitizing in the beginning. I just called Jill, right? Jill is our rep in Montreal, and she was like, "Okay, I'll send you a tech tomorrow." And then Samay would come, and he's like a guru, so he'd show us, be like, "Oh, how are you doing this? Don't thread it like that, or do this, hoop it like this." Not just was he coming to like help us fix the machine, which was not broken, it was just us not having the right digitizing, but he also came and showed us like, "Oh, here's what I do, or here's how I hoop this, or have you tried these types of hoops? Have you seen those?" And so it was really helpful to have that for sure. It helped us be more profitable in the embroidery department for sure.
Yeah, one thing to add, if you are needing tech support on an issue you're having and you are getting a tech out, don't just say, "There's a machine, you go to lunch, fix it when I'm gone." Sit there and watch them.
Yeah.
There's stuff that I may know how to do, but I watch a tech do it, and 3 hours of me changing out a reciprocator when they do it in 15 minutes, there's something to be said with their skill level, and you can learn a ton. And,
Amen.
oh, and maybe it's something where you learn it and you don't necessarily have to get the tech out next time.
I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more.
Cool. Well, this has been pretty fun, guys. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add, but I think we've done a pretty good job diving deeper into digitizing. So we've never really done a full digitizing piece like this where that was a sole focus. But yeah, I mean,
It's
Justin,
true.
Jeff, just to wrap up, is there anything new and fun and exciting that you guys are working on that maybe the audience can check in to see what's
Jeff and I will be teaching in Long Beach, the Impression Show, Long Beach 2025. I believe it's around the 23rd of January that week.
January, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Jeff and I will be talking about how to embroider on hats. We're going to be talking from digitizing to actually on the machine techniques, hooping, everything hats. We've seen that there's a ton of questions in the group and online, and the difficulty of doing finished hats. So we thought we would add that class to the list of classes there. I personally have another class I'll be teaching as well at Long Beach. I'm actually partnering with Eric Campbell, another gentleman, Joe Kramer. We actually do an embroidery toolkit where it's an all-day session. And this year we're going to be kind of focusing on mascot type designs and everything
Nice.
under the sun, 3D puff, applique, everything that goes along with mascots. So it's going to be fun.
The
Cool.
only
That's
other
so
thing
cool.
I'll throw onto that is if you haven't yet, check out embroiderynerd.io. It's an application that was developed by one of our co-owners. It does thread inventory, color matching. If you're on the subscription plan, you can color match to your thread inventory.
cool.
There's a little bit of a pricing calculator in there if you're new to pricing and kind of want to learn a little bit about it. And there's more features coming on that here pretty soon.
Yeah. In addition to that as well, we do have a website, the Embroidery Nerd University, where we have all our past webinars that we did available for you. There's webinars by myself. There's a 3-part 3D Puff webinar that covers pretty much everything that has to do with 3D Puff. We have some webinars by Lee Caraselli that discusses, her brilliant techniques on blending and gradients and whatnot. But we also have a full-blown 101 of digitizing a course there that teaches you the theory. There's not any specific software, even though we do reference certain softwares on there just so you can kind of see it done in the major softwares. But it's more of a theory-driven course to kind of teach you everything you need to know with digitizing.
That's awesome. Send me the link for those. I'll put this in the description. So guys, if you want to get ahead and learn a bit more and help your business, they're going to be linked down below in the description for the podcast. And I'll send these links to my team that's in the embroidery department. It's going to be homework for next week for sure.
There you go.
That's awesome that you guys are doing that.
Yeah.
And Zach, I
We
think
got
I
an
won't be
announcement too.
available. Yeah, go ahead.
This just in, when you guys were talking about the puff and the thicknesses, having a more rigid one. So Justin, were you the one that used to do some of the 3D puff for Lee, or you still do 3D puff for Lee Stewart? Was that you that gave him the reference? Okay, yeah. So he had asked me once for like a more rigid puff, like something that wasn't like as soft. And this was like maybe 6 months ago or something like that. And then I just remembered, I'm like what happened to that? Because we were talking about having more rigid. So I just got the email. We got it in stock already for about a month and a half. Some people are buying it. It's not on the website. So attention, everyone that buys at RB Digital, we do have a more rigid puff,
Nice.
which is going to be giving you those like sharper edges, and it's in black and
Edges.
white. So we'll get that up and running next week sometime. So
Awesome.
I was being efficient during the meeting. I'm like, where is that? I got to see what's going on. Awesome. Well, guys, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, and looking forward to continuing to work together.
You as well. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
See you guys in Long Beach. All right. Take
Sounds
care,
good.
everyone.